Okay, so in this video, I just want to go over the concept of prop drilling and use cases for providers, when to use prop drilling over a provider or vice versa, that kind of stuff. So in this example, I've just created a basic form here. It's a pretty ugly one, but bear with me. It's just to demonstrate how and like why you would use prop drilling or a provider in a case where you have like a lot of different interconnecting components. So I have this form component right here that I created, and it has two props. It has a title prop and a theme prop. So the theme prop is just this theme object right here, and it's just an object that has some string color values. So we have a primary color of red, a secondary color of just a darker red, uh, text primary black, and text secondary is white. And so we're just taking all of this data and passing it to this theme prop right here. And so if we go inside of the form component code, you can see we're actually using a few different components inside of the form itself. We're using this container component that I've created in here, a title component that I've created, the same container again, and then just some basic input fields. So if I go back to the app, again, we have title and theme. These two props are being passed and then received in the parameters of our form component right here. So I'm destructuring title and theme from our props object. Again, this would be the same thing as if I just took this out and said something like props, and then I said like const title is equal to props.title, and const theme is equal to props.theme. You could also just say const and then destructure it here in the variable. You could say title and theme equals props and destructure it like that. So either way works. Usually if you're just going to be destructuring some data from the props object, because you know that you're going to use it throughout your code a lot, then you can just destructure it in the parameter of the function component. So just a little review on that real quick. So we have title and theme. Now, one important thing that I really want to note here is that we are only using title in this one controlled scenario. Like, we're only passing this title prop once in our entire component code, and it's just being passed to our title component. We're not using title anywhere else. So this is actually a case of, or an example of prop drilling. So inside of the app, I'm taking this title prop, and it's being passed from this form component down to this title component, right? So it's kind of like a game of hot potato with these component props, right? So it's being passed from form to title, and then inside of title, I'm renaming it, as you can see here. So I'm, instead of like saying title, I'm just calling it name. So this is another example of why prop drilling can be really bad, because as you're passing your props down from one component to another, if you change the name of that prop as you're passing it down, then you'll start to lose track of what the value of the prop is, or which prop is what, and it just builds up and becomes really, really confusing and convoluted. In this case, it's not too bad. If you are going to prop drill, then I'd recommend that you always at least make the prop name equal, like, be the same name as the prop value, just so that you can remember, like, okay, this is a title or this is a name, which I'll get into right now. So that may happen a lot. I could also just call this title to make it less confusing. In fact, I think I'm just going to go ahead and do that real quick. So we'll just call that title. So yeah, so I'm just passing the title from the form to here, and then finally it's going to be rendered in this p tag. So this would be an example of prop drilling, because we're passing props from one component down to another, and so on. We could have, many other components that we're just continuously passing props between. Generally, this is frowned down upon, because for every single time that you pass the same prop to a different component, you're kind of creating a lot more work, because inside of that component, you then have to destructure that prop, and if you're doing this for like multiple different props for the same component, then your parameter space right here is going to start getting really, really long and messy, and the readability of it is just going to be harder to maintain. And yeah, it'll lead to a lot of issues with debugging later down the line. So prop drilling is not that favorable, but in this case, actually, it's more favorable than using a provider because we're only using this title prop right here pretty much just one time, right? There's no other component that we're passing this title prop to in our form code, and inside of our title component, we're not passing title to any other component inside of title, right? So it's just stopping after going from form to title, and so in this case, prop drilling would actually be favorable here. We wouldn't want to create a provider and wrap that provider around title just to have access to one property that, we can just pass down once and then have access to. So in this case, this is a good example of using prop drilling. It's simple. We're only using it one time, and so this is just a much cleaner and easier solution than using something like a provider. Now, theme, on the other hand, if I go ahead and highlight theme, you can just see how many times that we're using theme here just in the form component alone. We're passing theme to this container. We're also passing theme to the title, passing theme to container again, and then to our input fields, right? So we're using theme a bunch in this component, and this is definitely not ideal because we have to create a theme prop for each one of these components. And inside of the components themselves, we also have to make sure that we are destructuring that prop in the parameters of the function component. So we're also doing that inside of all of the code for these components. And so just imagine how messy this would be if we had many different props inside of this component that were going to be shared through many of its children. That would get out of hand pretty quickly. So this is a case where we would definitely want to use a context provider instead. So I'm going to go ahead and refactor this code to get rid of all of these themes everywhere, and then just wrap all of our child components inside of a context provider. So we wouldn't have to do anything differently for our form component. We can still just go ahead and pass title and theme. We could get rid of theme here and make the provider at this level in our component hierarchy, and wrap, we could have a form provider right here, and then maybe wrap our form inside of it like that. I would probably advise against this because it's just more work, and you have to also remember to wrap your form inside of a form provider every single time that you use a form. So you may as well just put the form provider inside the form, because that's also the only time that you're going to use this is with a form. So we're just going to get rid of this, rid of that. And so the form provider would be, inside of here and essentially look something like this. So we would just wrap all of our form content inside of our form provider, add a closing tag here, and it would look something like this. And then, we would pass a value and have our theme accessible inside of that value prop. So that's kind of what it would look like. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and actually make the provider component first. So let's go into our components folder, or actually let's make a new folder inside of SRC, and we'll just call it providers. And then inside of here, we'll just make one called a form provider.jsx. Actually, JSX is fine, because it is going to be a component. So yeah, so to start things off, again, a standard way of just creating a context provider is we're going to import create context and use context from React. We're going to say const form provider context equals create context, export const use form provider context equals this function that will call and return use context of our form provider, and this again just will return the whatever value prop that we pass to that form provider component. And so now we make the actual form provider component, so we'll say form provider is equal to this. We have to pass well, children is going to be just a built-in prop that just represents all of the children of the form provider. And then we're going to pass a value object as a prop to that. And we're going to say return form provider context dot provider and pass that value in. And then, of course, we want to render all of the children and also give them access to that value. So all of the children inside of the form provider will inherently have access to this value object because of the code that React provides us for this provider component. So now we just want to export this. So export default form provider. And so that's all done, so we can X out of this now. And now we just want to import this inside of our form code. So import form provider from providers slash form provider. And so now we can wrap all of our form components inside of this provider. And so now we want to go ahead and like pass this theme object to form provider, right? So the data that we want to make globally available to all of these child components, that's the data that we're going to put inside of the value prop of the provider. So in this case, we want to allow all of our children components to access theme. So we'll just go ahead and say theme is equal to theme. And I've done something wrong here. Oh yeah, this should be an object. So the first set of curly braces is just telling us that we're passing in some JavaScript or a JavaScript value. And so the second set of curly brackets is going to be the actual JavaScript object that we're passing to value. And again, using the ES6 syntax, we don't have to actually, if the key of our inside of our object is the same as the value, then we don't have to do this. We can just say, we can just write it one time and put theme, and it's the same thing. So now, this value object is globally accessible to all of these child components, and we do not have to pass this theme as a prop anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of theme in all of these props. So get rid of theme in all of these props. And you can see once I save this, it is going to error, or at least not work anymore, right? Because we haven't actually accessed this theme value from our provider yet inside of these components. So let's also go inside of, let's start off with container, right? So we can also get rid of theme up here because we're no longer prop drilling it. So we don't need to pass it as a prop anymore. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to import use form provider context, right? So we're importing the, let me open this back up again. We're importing this function right here, which essentially returns the value that we've passed to the form provider, which is the theme. So we can just import this hook right here, and at the top of our component, we can say const theme is equal to, and then we just call this use form provider context. Now it's important to note that, remember, inside of our form, if I can find it. Okay, yeah, this is the right one. Inside of our form, we're passing an object that contains theme, so we're not just passing the theme itself, but rather an object that has a theme property. So inside of our container, this is more like form context value, and then we could say like form context value dot theme to actually access it. But an easier way to do this, if we only care about the theme, which in this case we do because that's the only key value pair inside of the object, we can just destructure it right from the const, so we can just get theme from that value object. And then this is essentially the exact same thing as what we had before, except much better, much more concise, and we don't have to do any annoying prop drilling. And having to worry about keeping track of that as well, which is also another big downfall of prop drilling if it gets to be really, really deep into like nested components. So let's go back to form. The next thing that we can do is take care of title, because we were also using the theme inside of our title. Let's go here. We can get rid of title in the props. Just do import use form provider context. Same deal as before. We'll just say const theme, destructure our theme from that value object. Save that. Let's go ahead and also do this for our input field. So inside of input field, which is right here, we're going to import use form provider context and say const theme equals that. Oh yeah, just don't forget to remove theme from your from your prop parameter up here. So we'll go ahead and save that. And now that we've replaced all of our theme props with a theme provider instead, or a form provider rather, now we have the exact same result as before, except we have a much better method of getting that result. If I go inside of app, I can go ahead and go into primary and like change this from red to blue. I can change these to whatever I want those to be, and we get all of the results that we expect. So yeah, that's pretty much the difference between prop drilling and using a context provider, and when you would want to use one over the other. So yeah, hopefully this video was helpful. I think it's definitely important to realize, you know, if it seems like too much work to create a provider for something, then it probably is. If you have nested components or many components that are going to be using the same props, then it's probably better to use a context provider instead of prop drilling. So that's the main takeaway, I think, from this video. And yeah, so hopefully that helped. And yeah.